Hello and welcome to News9 Live. I'm Aditya Kaul, and this is In India's Interest. Over the last few days, ever since the release of a new Netflix series, IC-814, there's been a controversy raging. Well, people have different perspectives on what really has transpired and what is the film all about. Now, the film is about IC-814 hijacking that happened in the December of 99 from Kathmandu, and then the aircraft was taken to Amritsar, Lahore, Dubai, and finally in Kandahar. All the passengers were safe, but one passenger, Rupin Katyal, was killed by the terrorists, and three terrorists finally, after negotiations, were released. And unfortunately, all those three terrorists who were released became deadly terrorists later, formed Jaish-e-Mohammed and other terror groups, and rest is history. It's been almost 25 years now. And joining us is Mr. Anil Sharma, who was the chief of the cabin crew, senior flight pursuit on this aircraft. So thank you very much for joining us. We are speaking after a very long time, and thanks for agreeing to speak, really. I would have really loved to, in fact, include you in a documentary that I made 2 years ago. Unfortunately, we were not in touch at that time. And that time it was on Zahoor Mistry, one of the youngest hijackers of IC-814, who was killed mysteriously in Karachi. But sir, to begin with, the first question that is on my mind, because you were on that flight, did you watch this IC-814 series? And if you did, what is your first reaction to it?
Very happy to connect with you through this medium. And in fact, the day it got released, I remember one of the first things which caught my attention was your comment that you're not liking this stuff. And I've been familiar with your name on X, and so I was curious. Then you know what happened thereafter. I've seen the series. In fact, I haven't finished watching it as yet. It's a little painful to go through the whole thing, not because it uh, casts me in a poor light, but also because I think they've compromised the whole story a little too much for comfort. I've been watching programs on television a little while ago. Also, other channels have carried it, and initially I thought that there were people who were a little over outraged, if I put it like that. But I realized that there is some substance in why they are being. There's so much of uproar about the whole issue, and
Right.
nothing convinces me about the way things have been portrayed, whether it's in the cabin to begin with, because that's where we were, and that's where it hurt us, they hit us, when on that fateful day of 24th of December 1999. But even thereafter, when the scene shifts to the negotiations part of it or the bureaucratic handling, it's it is very the portrayal is very unconvincing. You don't feel that those guys, and I'm sure it could have been managed otherwise. You felt that the actors are not taking it very seriously. It didn't. The emotions didn't register with them. And out of all the people, the chief negotiator, who in the real incident was Mr. Doval. Now, having known him, he launched my book also at IIC in 2014. Having met him at least half a dozen times at his Vivekananda International Foundation, I know what a serious guy he is when it comes to interacting with people. Hey, they've shown a little bit of buffoonery, if I put it like that. And Manoj Pawar is a good actor, otherwise. But so all these things don't add up. Yes, the location they've chosen, Jordan, is good. There are technical aspects which are well taken care of, but overall, I mean, those kind of things cannot rescue a badly made series.
You're saying that this is a badly made series. You also said that with your character, there have been compromises that have been made. The exact truth of it is not being shown. So, do you mean that there are factual inaccuracies in the film? And you, as someone who experienced it firsthand over the 7 days or 8 days, would say that there are some very big factual inaccuracies in the series?
First of all, when they say that, okay, it's a work of fiction or something like that, and frankly, I haven't evaluated all the aspects that they've kind of washed their hands off or shrugged their shoulders about. But having said that, you say that, okay, it's a work fiction, then you go on to introduce the pilots. The pilot's name has been retained as one being very close to the original name. Devi Sharan becomes Sharan Dev. Then they change the name of the co-pilot. Fair point. Nothing problem. No problem with that. The name of the flight engineer is changed. Then they introduce three of the cabin crew members, and their names have been changed. For some reason, now this is where my problems begin. It would have taken them less than 30 seconds to, give a name to the other five and shown them, as being, because everything was happening in the cabin.
Mm.
Whatever you say. So the inaccuracies began, the compromises began at that point in time. Then they show me getting assaulted. I mean, I'm telling you whatever, and I say without any Stockholm syndrome about those guys who had captured us or made us hostages. That they never assaulted anybody except the junior most flight person, Mr. Satish from Hyderabad. He was hit twice on the back of his neck and pushed, and just now the girls were attacked the way they've shown this thing. And I seriously, Aditya, I find it very hard to understand that how do these things make the script more crisp or make it more watchable by people, or I mean, all that they end up doing is create a avoidable controversy.
Mm. If I can ask you, if you could just go back 25 years back
Mhm.
and the flight is hijacked, uh, could you just briefly tell us that what happened initially? And if you had any, interaction with the terrorists, who the terrorist was, were you able to recognize, and what did those terrorists convey to you?
Look, on the first day, we had no clue that these guys had, they looked like very normal passengers. I mean, the very fact that they didn't stand out meant that they were well trained. They had well rehearsed their parts. Two of them came and sat in the J class where I was working along with two hostesses, and the other three, I'm not sure about the fifth one, but two of them were definitely in the economy class, right? Initially, I mean, as I've said, or as is known, that I had gone into the cockpit to offer some tea or coffee. It had been a long day for the cockpit crew that had flown all the way from Hyderabad to Delhi, Delhi to Kathmandu, and the delay must have impacted them as well. So I was joking with them, and so what are you going to do? What are you going to drink? And that kind of aviation stuff. And when I was coming out, I found a guy wearing a mask, and he bespectacled, shorter than me. And so he said, "हम तैयार overtake कर रहे हैं. आप कोई होशियारी मत दिखाइएगा." So instinctively, my hand was moving towards the intercom. What was actually a very feeble attempt to warn the captain, because they had already sort of made the first undefeatable move, if I may describe it like that. And so I moved aside, and then this guy who was hovering around in the galley, he says, "आप पीछे जाइए." So these are the two guys I was accosted by initially. And I am pretty certain, because the point at which I was standing just outside the cockpit, there were two toilets on either side. And I'm pretty certain there was one guy inside that, because they were not aware, that these guys don't know martial arts, or not Israelis trained or something. So, but in order to sort of prevent any such action by me or anybody else, that guy was hiding over there. So, because when I went back, they told me to go to the economy class. Then two guys materialized. One was already the chief was in the cockpit. So two guys were there. So, since I had not seen the third guy, so I'm assuming that he was in the. Then they made me sit on the first row of the economy class. And then I saw over there two guys get up. And one of them was doctor. Later down, he donned a mask, and then he took out whatever knife or something he had with him in his bag. Then the last guy to get up was Shankar, who they were addressing as Shankar. And this chap was rummaging through his bag, and that's
Okay.
when the intercom didn't work, and so the guy, chap whose address is Bhola, one you have written about or made a
Mhm.
documentary about, he was very wild that मेरे को बोलने के लिए कुछ दो, announcement करने के लिए. So I told him, given the PA, it didn't work, so he banged it against the wall. And then this guy Shankar said, "Ki, kyun nahi hua? Kya hua?" And by the time I realized he had a pistol in his hand, revolver, in fact, pistol that chief had. So this is how things transpired. After that, of course, all hell broke loose. They started hitting people. They started shouting at them. They started pushing people out of the J class to go back into this thing, to the economy class, and all that happened in the
You know,
initial.
you mentioned Bola and Shankar, and
Mhm.
others were Burger, Doctor in Chief. But there's a controversy over the names also. Now, since I have researched about it and you have been part of it, unfortunately, we know that these were the code names that were used, including Bola and Shankar. And in many terror attacks, we see that to give a cover, often Hindu names are used, or names from other religions are used. Do you think that in this particular case, it's okay that they have used the code names in the film, in the series? But towards the end, do you think there should have been a clarification that these are the real names of the terrorists and this is the terror organization that they belong to? I'm saying this only because, you know, uh, during the series, we see Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the real Atal Bihari Vajpayee coming in. We see the real Brijesh Mishra coming in. We see other real figures as well, photographs of whom, including the three terrorists, Masood Azhar and others. So why have they deliberately tried to hide the real identity of the terrorists? What was your honestly, you can tell me, what was your perception?
No, no, I'm fully in agreement with you. Most certainly, there should have been a clarification. I mean, in fact, I was reading on one of the comments of on a post of X where the guy said that even when the first time they addressed each other as Bhola and Shankar, slight exchange of glances between the crew, cabin crew, would have, suddenly surprised or something would have, like they are making. And there was a time when I thought that probably we are wasting too much energy on this. But now I've realized that one, this was definitely expected of a team which is supposed to have researched it very well. Second, it's a sensitive topic, and I also see a pattern. That like later when that guy says I'm a Pakistani and I mean wo nahi sikhata. I've got nothing against that. There are good people in every religion, no doubt about it. But to pick that out and highlight it and try to show that it was all hunky dory. It's certainly not this thing, and I think I am in agreement with the masses who are getting outraged about the use of these two names without any clarification. Being put out by the uh, producers or the director or anybody. I mean, the people are still defending it that you see it as a work of fiction, and how can you see it as a work of fiction, as you rightly said, then when they're showing footage from all those real life incidents. So it's I think it's a mischievous. It's done with a very if I'm using a strong word, evil intent.
I see. Sir, the negotiation that you spoke about Mr. Ajit Doval, who's currently, of course, the National Security Advisor of India since last 10 years. Uh, I have known him. I have interacted with him several times. And in fact, he has discussed briefly with me, what happened during IC-814. I'm not revealing it because, I respect
Perfectly
him
fine.
and respect privacy. But, sir, I want to understand from you the way it has been depicted, the negotiation process. It's almost laughable, the kind of comic entry that they bring in. Ajit Doval, as a person, is a very serious person. He's respected for that kind of depth that he has and understanding he has. But, those three or four officers at Kandahar airport being shown in a very comic manner. And, it's almost a comedian who has been given a role of Ajit Doval and, he's interacting in a very funny manner. That seriousness, that depth, perhaps to mock the government, or even on the other side, I'll tell you what my perception was. Even the crisis that happened in New Delhi, or the desperation, wasn't really visible. They weren't able to show the kind of crisis or desperation that was on the streets of Delhi or in the power corridors where the crisis management group meeting was happening. So what is your comment on the negotiation part that was shown and the crisis that unfolded in India?
I'll begin to answer this by taking the last point first. That you're right in saying that they were not able to, or they didn't want to. I would put it like that. I mean, the director claims to be a very accomplished man, and he has a mm, um, bunch of films to be boasting about. Of course, one can have opinion about them, and not necessarily a favorable opinion. I mean, and as you said, the tension of the streets wasn't well captured. The uh, I mean, okay, there was a bureaucratic tussle or something. We all know it happens. You know it a lot better than I do. But the fact is, this kind of a crisis they knew by the time they've shown this, the aircraft had already been to Amritsar, to Lahore, to Dubai. They had come to know that there was one guy stabbed to death and another guy injured, and there were people separated from their families and stuff like that. So it was developing into a very, very serious situation. And to find that guys are promoting each other, isko bhej do, usko bhej do, and all that, somehow, I mean, I was really left me wishing that they had the producers had picked up somebody like Neeraj Pandey, because he's done his movies will never get a feeling that, as you said, it is a comic role given to Larry. And from whatever we came to make out, we got to know. I got to know when Mr. Dole traveled with on the relief flight. The head of that cabin team was Mr. D.K. Mehta, who has the distinction of being the only flight attendant in the world who got hijacked 3 times.
Oh,
And look at his luck. He came to Kandahar, and they all thought it was, a quick turnaround. They would reach Kandahar, everything will be wrapped up in a few hours, and they would fly back. They got stuck for 5 nights. So this was told to be my Mr. Mehta. His name is D.K. Mehta. He says
okay.
कि when Mr. Doval came on board, he says, और Mehta साहब क्या हाल है? अब तो flying safe हो रही है. So, that kind of a man, as you said, that he's very focused. He
Yeah.
smiles and something. He's a very good-natured fellow, no doubt about it. God him, bless him with good health for many more years to come. But he took his uh, task very, very seriously. It wasn't like this ki kal baat kare and all that. I don't think it was decided by Mr. Doval. I mean, he's all powerful and everything. He knows a thing or two about mm, um, everything, espionage and stuff like that. But यहाँ पे वो नहीं था. And it wasn't like that. I remember 29th को when they segregated some people to release. That was Mr. Dole was at work, obviously, but they're saying that we need more people to be released before we start considering accepting your demands. So, and then something happened, and then those people were pushed back. So on the screen, I'm sorry, on the PA system, we had an announcement कि एक बात अपने जहन में अच्छी तरह उतार लीजिए, मौलाना का मसला हल होने के बाद ही, and then because the chief of the 5 terrorists was sitting in the cockpit, so I probably forgot to. So this is the kind of tension that was, you know, all pervasive
Mm.
in the cabin, in the negotiating chamber, and everywhere else. So how can you say कि ये चलें वो चलें? ठीक कह रहे हैं आप. Your assessment is perfectly on target. It just doesn't add up.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you, of course, filmmakers take creative liberty. They go through a book, in this case, 1 or 2 books that they have studied, and perhaps recreate it or reimagine it, and sometimes take too much creative liberty. In this case, I saw one of your female air hostesses in your team. There is kind of a romantic twist that they've shown, that a terrorist is, she's noticing him, he's noticing her, and there is a kind of a chemistry, or there is a kind of a conversation, a light-hearted banter that is kind of happening. On the other hand, there's also shown terrorists and the passengers playing Antakshari. And finally, they've also shown a humane side of terrorists who's trying to help one of the air hostesses. Again, I don't know what happened in the flight. You can throw more light how true this is.
See, to begin with, they once they started pushing us back. Everyone was pushed back. All of us, we were made to sit at different places. And they said heads down, heads down. This is before the aircraft went over Lahore and came back to Amritsar. And then this guy Berger, because all of a sudden somebody tells you to sort of lower your head, your back
Right.
starts to hurt. You're not accustomed to that. It's not a normal posture. And then this guy came and told the gentleman sitting next to me, who turned out to be Dr. Tandon, and he had written a good word about me, and he was released at Dubai. He says, "ठीक है, आप straight हो जाइए." Then he told me also, you can also straight and all that. And then they started shifting us again. It was during that period they became a little rough with my junior colleague, Satish. And then this thing happened at Amritsar, that two passengers were stabbed. One of them unfortunately lost his life. The other guy was also in great pain. It was Satish and another hostess who attended to the Ripon Katyal. In fact, they were saying that if you give him some water, somebody was saying, give him a tablet, and they had a doctor, Dr. Anita Joshi, who was also assisting them. Then things started to settle down once they and got at Lahore. At Lahore, he called me. He says, the chief called me, ki air guards kahan hai? So I thought he was talking about some instrument. Then I told him, I said, मैं समझा नहीं, कहता जो सिक्योरिटी वाले होते हैं, सर हमारे यहाँ नहीं होते, कहता अगर हुए तो आपको प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगा. तो आई टोल्ड हिम बच्चों की कसम, कहता नहीं नहीं ये सब करने की जरूरत नहीं है. सो दिस वाज द काइंड ऑफ इंटरेक्शन. देन ही टोल्ड मी दैट दो मोहतरमा को भेज दीजिए इनकी खिदमत करने के लिए, पायलट्स की, द टी कॉफी एंड स्टफ लाइक दैट. So this was the scene before we reached Kandhar. अब कंधार पहुंचने के बाद ठीक है, they made us sit on two successive rows. Captains were also made to sit in the cabin on the 10th row. I remember very clearly, accurately. And I was three others were sitting on row number 16, C, D, E, F, middle seats, and four of my colleagues were sitting on 17. 15 C, D, E, F. So they were, whenever they wanted to call, they would call one of us and say, come do this, come do that. And this long story is leading to the fact that off and on, they would always say, Sharma sahab, apni girls ko bol dijiye service kar dein and all that. And they were not allowing the junior person to get up either. Inka must be a part of the rehearsal and training and whatever. And then I'm quoting their statements at random. One, they said, we heard Bengali girls, we had heard Bengali girls are very good looking, and Calcutta girls very good looking, because three of them were from Calcutta and three of them were Bengalis as well. So, but other than that, and trust me, this morning I've spoken to one of my team members of that day, and she says, I couldn't watch the series for more than 5 minutes, sir. This is all rubbish. These were her words. When we started talking about this, she says they have shown that this one had a soft corner and this and that. She says they were saying that these girls are like sisters. Now, trust me, I also didn't know this fact, all this, and which is true, because they were not making any romantic overtures at all, and they were maintaining a very healthy distance. So maybe it was a part of the training or whatever, something. So this is very difficult to swallow, that there was something which nobody else got to see, or something. They were happy, of course. Who wouldn't be happy to be made tea by one of the good-looking hostesses or something like that? But it was not like that कि वो अलग से खड़े बातें कर रहे हैं, or there are vibes which are happening. This is again making a mockery of the.
Do
I
you
don't know
also
what
feel,
what
sir?
it achieves. I don't know
Sorry, come again.
what this sort of a deviation achieves. I don't know. Human side, in the sense, and you could say that they were often on reaching out, and वो तो it was surfacing. I'm not denying that fact. But देखो उसमें क्या होता है. Now this answers that query of yours. कि they were playing Antakshi or something. Frankly, I don't remember Antakshi bit. And I've said that probably if they were playing with a section of the people, it was a huge aircraft, and that I'm not aware of. I definitely know that On the third day, they started calling people, inviting people to recite a poem or you know share a joke or something like that. And some of us very incensed, "Ki, what is this happening?" But after the episode ended, I realized that this was basically their way to alternate between horror and humor.
Right.
The thing is, if you pin down somebody far too long, the chances are the person will retaliate with some degree of rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
He'll say, to hell with मेरा जो हो रहा है, I can't take this any longer. So you got to give them a feeling, got to lull them into believing that ठीक हो जाएगा, सब कुछ हो जाएगा, don't worry, ऐसे कर, because people were suffering, um, shall I say, depression. They were suffering from some sort of a fright syndrome. Even if one or two people had were heading for a nervous breakdown, it wouldn't be an exaggeration. So,
If I can, if I
hmm,
can ask you also that, in the series towards the end, they show some images and then text comes in, and then they say that the five terrorists and the three terrorists that were released, five hijackers and the three terrorists, after they left the aircraft and the airport in Kandahar, went straight to meet Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, were received by them, and in a way tried to say that Pakistan was not involved at all in the hijacking, and Pakistan was not also involved in receiving or being part of that party that really happened in their honor. Do you feel that Pakistan, by doing this, has been given a complete clean sheet? The Pakistan ISI, who was perhaps equally a partner in the crime of this hijacking?
I can tell you one thing which should effectively settle this debate, and it's also mentioned in my book. I, after I'd compiled my book, consisting of 15 episodes, which happened prior to Kandahar and then Kandahar thing, I went to Mr. Doval to seek his blessings, and so he told me a few things, that you not made an index, and he was a very well-read man, and then he was saying that, what about the 71 war? This happened when, have you
The,
checked with Mr. Gandhi? And, but this is
yeah.
off the record, of course. And then he told me, after these guys left, we suddenly found a gentleman in a blue blazer and bespectacled. He came to address us. We had no clue that he was Mr. Doval. And he gave a very stirring speech. He says, "You're very lucky to escape attempt, a terror attempt or a terror incident orchestrated by one of the most dreaded outfits in this region, Lashkar-e-Toiba." Right? That's one. Then this was on board. Then he told us that, "Oh, it's okay. Tonight you'll be flying back," and blah blah blah. And when I went with my draft of the book, then he told me, he says, because I'm sure you know that he was for 6 years in Islamabad.
Yes.
And that was also the time a lot of Indian Airlines aircraft were hijacked. And
Yeah.
inevitably, they all landed up in either Lahore or Karachi or somewhere or something like that. And uh, people who are my colleagues, they told me that what a role he played. He knew everyone by this thing. So he told me, Mr. Dole told me that when he was boarding the aircraft in which we were there, so he heard somebody saying, Dole Saab. So he looked away, looked at him. I mean, he was tired. He was 5 nights, he had negotiated. So he couldn't place the gentleman very um, correctly. So the fellow says, बहुत दिन से पाकिस्तान नहीं आए, ठीक है? So Mr. Dole smiled and he climbed. So I asked him, I said, who was it? He's the IS guy. So it's not possible. I
Mm.
mean, who else would have orchestrated this sort of you know, it had a stamp of Pakistani all over. What they did at Lahore, pretend that we don't want, and it was only to be in the good books of some of their international friends.
Mm.
So most
And when
certainly.
And when Mr. Doval actually came in that flight and announced this, any other details that you can share, perhaps? This would have really lifted the spirit of the passengers who were waiting for the 7 nights helplessly. What else did he say or convey, and what was the reaction of the passengers?
No, no, people were very, people knew that I mean, all of us knew that we were finally being addressed by somebody who looked in control of the situation. And he didn't introduce himself. I don't think he said that I've been the negotiator and all that. And then when we went down, we found him and Mr. Vivek Karju, and then we told him also that we were given to understand that you all were here and stuff like that. And we flew back. I flew in this flew as a passenger in the same aircraft which Mr. Jaswant Singh flew back by. But his uh, address to us had definitely, as you rightly assessed, morale boosting, effect on most of us. And then we had Captain S.P.S. Suri, the gentleman who stayed back on the 31st and brought the aircraft on the 1st. You can read
Yes.
about it in my book,
Yeah.
and that very interesting this thing. They also encountered a lot of problems with the Pakistani airspace, and we had the deputy managing director, Captain J.R.D. Rao, along with them. So, when Captain S.P.S. Suri came, we've all known him to be a flamboyant captain, who again, people who look larger than life, they look in control. वैसे भी सरदार do in look,
Yeah.
imposing, and a very tall guy. So all this happened, and the funny thing which happened also in the midst of all this, is suddenly alarm started ringing. Tuk, tuk,
Okay.
tuk, tuk, tuk. And once people run helter skelter, then what is this? Is it a time bound? Because you never knew what those guys could have done.
This was when people were coming out, or
No, no,
when
no. We
exactly?
were, this is after Mr. Doval left.
Okay.
And then they transferred. We had a, merchant navy or a marine chap on this thing. I've forgotten his name. It started with K. Uh, it was his in his bag. He had turned it on a little while ago just to check whether it was working or something like that. So we all almost bashed him. What the hell? Why are you giving us another
Scare.
round of scare?
Yeah. Yeah. Finally, Mr. Anil Sharma, there's been obviously a lot of controversy on social media. People are objecting to this. In India, what happens is that there's a, film certification board. Obviously, films are certified, watched, and then there's a rating that is given, and they're passed. On Netflix and OTT, there is no such concept of any CBFC certification, etc. It's a freedom to exercise. Any documentary, any film can come up on Netflix or other OTT platforms. Now, interestingly, what has happened is that Information and Broadcasting Ministry has summoned the Netflix India head tomorrow afternoon to New Delhi at the Information and Broadcasting Ministry. And this is in relation to IC-814 and the controversies around it. What is your opinion? Although you're not from the film world, you're not from the Information Broadcasting Ministry, but you are part of this story, an integral part of this story. So do you think that there should be some action? Do you think there should be some course correction? Or do you think that the Information and Broadcasting Ministry should take this very seriously? Because it's not just an episode from history that is coming out in the form of a film. It also matters national security.
Agree with every word you said, and I feel very strongly about the subject. Not just this time. This time, of course, they've um, sort of tried their luck and they've taken it too far, And I'm glad that the Netflix head has been summoned, because you got to plant, you have to sow a seed of suspicion in somebody's mind that you can't keep on doing this for a lifetime. That's one thing. Second, my problem with this dates back to the time Secret Games was released. Uh,
Right.
and I found it to be very controversial. I mean, the things which you would never ever get to see on the cinema. There was foul language used, and when I started writing on some of the Facebook groups and this thing, people said no, but you hear it on the roads. It doesn't mean that you promote it. Today it's got normalized. Those cuss words. Nobody sort of gets as surprised as somebody would have that many years ago. So they tried
Right.
it with this. Then you had crime. What was that? Delhi crime or something like that. Even there, they use a lot of foul language every now and then, and I cannot understand how. this adds to the artistic excellence of the particular series or something like that. It's very essential, Aditya, now. The government has to take the bull by the horns, They have to have a certification board. They have to, what are the other 2 points you said that
Some
has
kind of
the
a
time
course
come to?
correction
Yeah,
or some
course
action by
correction,
the ministry.
most certainly. Because if we don't do, then this will definitely give such mischief makers, if I may term them like that, to do something, play around with the history, play around with this thing. It's a part of an ideological agenda also that they want to
Right.
do this. So I think it's very, very, I mean, and people are seriously not in a very, very forgiving mood. If the government does not do something concrete, then there'll be a huge wave of disappointment which will affect people. It's not just about the Hindu names or something like that. They've kind of, as you rightly said, that, okay, you say it's a work of fiction, then you bring in footage from here, you just say. So you are pushing whatever your um, intent is, your agenda is almost at your free will. So and we are a responsible nation. We are going ahead. We are marching ahead. We are uh, destined to do better. And you can't tame this just a few hundred individuals. So
Right.
I'm very, very clear-headed about this, that yes, the time has come to now not shy away from this responsibility, even if it means setting up a new division within the thing. It'll cost, of course, but the cost we are paying at the moment is far greater. You have people, sort of believing that this is the way it happened, and this is also the consequence of a series like this being released. That tomorrow people will say, "Oh, Bhola aur Shankar hi to the wo." They will not have the patience to you and I have that go into the depth of the matter and say, oh, no, no, their real names or there's something like that. So all this is absolutely unavoidable now.
Absolutely. So on that note, thank you very much, Mr. Anil Sharma, for joining us.